There died a myriad, and of the best among them. For an old bitch gone in the teeth, for a botched civilization.
A century ago, the great powers of Europe marched off to battle, and there had never been anything like it before. The old world was no stranger to the swirling red chaos of war, but this one, the Great War as people came to call it, was different. It was bloodier, bigger, costlier, more horrific in every way, and it ushered in a new and grim era of mechanized slaughter. Armed with the deadliest weapons ever devised, vast armies of millions slashed savagely at each other on battlefields from the Western Front to East Africa, from Jerusalem to the Russian steppe, from the Alps to the dark waters off Jutland.
When the war had ended, after more than 4 years of fighting, over 17 million souls had been lost. When the guns fell silent in November of 1918, it was the beginning of a new age, a darker age. Instead of a war that would safeguard democracy, it ended up being a war that ushered in a whole new age of barbarism, an age of genocide, a world that could bring about somebody like Hitler, somebody like Mussolini. Instead of being the war to end all wars, it became, in fact, the prelude to a second, much greater world war.
The Great War was in its third year when it became America's war too. America in 1917 was young and rich and naive, rippling with the sinews of power, but not interested in flexing its muscles in Europe. It wasn't looking for a fight. For nearly 3 years, the United States kept itself carefully neutral. But the war wouldn't leave America alone. Pushed to the breaking point by German aggression, the United States abandoned its neutrality in the spring of 1917.
Nearly a year would pass before American troops would get overseas on the Western Front. Several more months would pass before they took part in combat in a meaningful way, fighting and dying alongside their British and French allies. But when they did, it made all the difference. It turned the tide. Allied victory owed much to American lives.
American lives. For America's first act as a great power came at a high price. The First World War demanded much from us as a nation, as a people. The hard hand of war lay heavily upon the entire country, from coast to coast. And the experience divided us, set American against American, unlike anything in our history except the Civil War.
I sometimes just cannot believe that all this has come to us, and that never again will we be happy and young as we were, and that always there will be the pain beneath the laughter.
The war came to the big cities of the East, to prairie, farm, and hamlet, to the new, vibrant, and smoke-smudged towns of the Heartland. For towns like Dayton, Ohio, the Great War, fought thousands of miles away from home, would change everything.
All the things that are significant about the American story in World War I are to be found in Dayton. Industry, some of it very high-tech. For example, the Wright brothers' Dayton Wright Aircraft Company, a number of firms that would end up manufacturing tanks and trucks for the war effort. It was a city of immigrants, with large numbers of Germans, Hungarians, and other recent, mostly European immigrants. The African-American population was significant and thriving and played a major role in the war effort. Everything that tells the story of America in World War I is to be found in Dayton in a way that you don't find in bigger cities or in smaller towns.
Dayton's story is America's story. The story of American industry and ingenuity put to the test in the first war of the industrial age. The story of great patriotism and greater sacrifice, both at home and in the trenches over there. The story of intolerance of fellow Americans because of the languages they spoke or because of the color of their skin. and the story of how, despite every obstacle strewn in their path, they proved to the world that the color of their skin didn't make them any less American. The story of how and why our government told us what to produce, what to consume, what to say, what to think. And the story of how, when it was all over, Americans tried to make sense of it all, to comprehend the loss and the suffering, and to cope with the strange new world that confronted them. For no event in American history changed our country more than the Great War. Dayton, like our country, like our world, is what it is today, good and bad, because of what happened a century ago.
All our lives, before and after, have just been bookends for the heroic, tragic volume of the Great War.